one of the difficulties and challenges for open adoption, particularly in the context of the apology for past forced adoption and the promise never to do that again in Australia, is to make people understand that adoption now is as different than adoption in the past as a pen and quill is from an iPad. That we're talking about different realities here, and that's very hard to always get through to the community, that it's not a return to past practices. Some people want to return to those practices and some definitely don't. So the message has to get out there quite seriously that we're talking about a different reality of adoption than the past. I was born in 1954. I was adopted at 2 weeks under the closed system. We had our first child ourselves, and my adoptive mother died about 6 weeks later. Our first child was born premature, but she got to hold him. But she died soon after, and my father wanted to talk to me and my brother and tell us something, and I was 23 at the time, and he told me, well, you're adopted, I've always wanted to tell you. I received my non-identifying information. It was a pack of 12 or 13 pages, because they decided in adoption services in Queensland it'd be nice if they put all this non-identifying information in a nice A4 page, nicely set out. Well, I was quite surprised, because I had 10 of those pages. I found out that my mother had 10 children and 9 of them had been adopted.
Wow. And
1 hadn't been adopted. I can report within the last 2 weeks I've met my brother, and that has been a very good experience for me. He was an only child, he didn't have a brother. At our first meeting he showed me pictures of my father. He said, and he used the terms, these are pictures of our father. And I can tell you I've been doing this stuff for ages, but I just felt there's something changed in me, and people at work said, well, you're different today. They're not just making it up, because I do have those, I have a story, I have a narrative. It's not got as many blanks in it. I don't have all the relationships, because some people have died that I would have liked to have met. It would have been difficult. It would have been difficult to talk to my mother, but knowing my sister who lived with her and looked after her at the end of her life, she would have come around, because we share the same genetics, we have similar characteristics, we like to be nice to people. So, you know, it's been a big journey for me, but I feel it's been an unnecessary journey, because when the parental rights are terminated for whatever reason, you don't have to terminate the relationships. You don't have to terminate a person's identity, and you certainly don't have to put aside all the values you hold, like honesty and truthfulness and keeping promises and being a good responsible citizen and pursuing the excellence in practice. These things don't have to be put aside to bring an adoption into being. They have to be there all the time. When people ring us, no adopted person who rings us knows whether they're the part of a forced adoption, because they don't know the story. So we have openness changes that. Openness and honesty means people know the story in whatever form, in a way that's developmentally appropriate from day one. And it's a shared story, because it takes 2 families to make an adoption, not one putting their hand up to be an adoptive family. It takes 2 families, and we have to look after both those families. Well, I think the developmental issues have been touched on here, that the challenges of open adoption is really about supporting and educating all the families to have the best interest of the child at stake. And the minister's here. I'm glad the minister's here, because as I said last time, if you provide proper pre and post adoptive support, you won't have high-end costs in terms of mental health and therapy and support. It is a good investment to provide proper support for open adoption, so that information and emotional support is available all the way throughout the journey. You can take that argument to Treasury and say, look, this will save you money in the long run if you give lifelong support. It's a lifelong issue. And without openness and honesty, without a focus on the lifelong interest of the child, and without adequate pre- and post-adoption support for everybody involved, including the original families, the 3-legged stool falls over. If you don't have one of those legs, it just won't work. Adoptive families break up too. They're not all forever families. And we have to be able to put special supports around that, because that's more devastating to someone who's already felt a rejection, not necessarily experienced a rejection, felt as though they'd been rejected, to become part of another family which is just like another family and falls apart just like other families. It's going to have other particular issues for people who come into that family as the ugly ducklings. Oh, well, I think there's three types of support needed. One, there's government support, access to information and services, smoothing the road. Professional support that's informed about adoption-specific issues, and part of the national scene is coming out this month, should be the Australian Psychological Society are doing their adoption-specific training for healthcare professionals on the impact of adoption, but also peer support. So support should be given not just to professionals and by government, but also by people affected by adoption specifically, in order to provide services to each other. Because our experience shows that people affected by adoption sometimes are suspicious of developing relationships with government or with professionals, particularly past adoption. Perhaps not all you people, because you'll all be wonderful. But in the past, people don't like going back to the government setting or the professional setting. They don't. So that the peer support groups fill in that gap. So you people are going to be a lot better informed, but realistically, you're like anybody doing a job. If I have someone coming to my house to paint my room, there's three kind of standards: more than adequate, adequate, or not adequate. And in terms of workers in the system, the reality is you're going to have people who are more than adequate, adequate, and not adequate. The function of today, tomorrow, and other kind of support services for you is to make sure you're at least adequate, and preferably more than adequate, in the job you do. Because not only is it and we saw this in the last forum, not only is a lack of permanency in the foster care system and relationships, some of the young people that were at the last forum said the workers keep changing. There's not a consistency. There's not a trusting relationship built over time with people in the department. And that's disruptive as well. It doesn't help the department do its work to have different people responsible and appearing all the time in a child's life. It's all about building relationships of trust over time.